The patrol car's lights sliced through the dusk, painting the dusty road red and blue. Eli Parker gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Chevy truck, heart pounding as the siren's wail faded behind him. He wasn't speeding out. He was barely pushing 40, but in this small Virginia town, being different was reason enough to get pulled over. Eli glanced at the rearview mirror, catching his own reflection, sharp cheekbones, long lashes, a face that had always drawn stares. Some curious, some cruel. At 23, he'd learned to wear his beauty like armor. But tonight, it felt like a target. He pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires, and took a steadying breath. What had he done this time? Or was it just who he was, too soft, too bold, too Eli, that made him a magnet for trouble? The officer swaggered up, his badge glinting under the truck's headlights. "Step out, son," he drawled, his partner lingering by the patrol car, arms crossed. "You're too pretty to be driving this rig. Looks like it belongs to a real man." The word stung, but Eli's jaw tightened. He'd heard worse. He stepped out, his boots hitting the ground with purpose, and faced the officer, whose smirk faltered just a fraction. "License and registration," the officer said, recovering his bravado. Eli handed them over, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving the man's face. The officer scanned the documents, then paused, squinting at Eli. "Elijah Parker. Huh. You from around here?" "Born and raised," Eli replied, his voice steady but laced with an edge. He'd grown up in Cloverdale, a speck of a town where everyone knew everyone and judged everyone. Being openly queer in a place like this was like painting a bullseye on your back. Eli had learned that early, from the snickers in high school to the whispers at the diner where he waited tables. But he'd also learned to fight back, not with fists but with a quiet defiance that unnerved people more than any punch could. The officer chuckled, handing back the papers. "Well, Elijah, you ought to get a car that suits you better. This truck's for folks who work for a living." His partner snorted, and Eli's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wanted to snap back, to tell them how he'd rebuilt this truck himself, piece by piece, with money he'd scraped together from double shifts. But before he could speak, a voice cut through the tension. "Everything okay here?" It was Mia, stepping out of the passenger side. Her dark hair fell in waves, and her eyes held a fire that could burn through steel. She wasn't just Eli's best friend. She was his anchor, the one who'd stood by him when half the town turned their backs. She crossed her arms, staring down the officers with a look that dared them to keep going. The lead officer's smirk faded. "Just a routine check, ma'am," he said, but his tone was less certain now. Mia didn't back down. "Doesn't sound routine to me," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "You got a reason for pulling him over? Or is this just for kicks?" Eli felt a surge of gratitude, but also dread. Mia's boldness was a double-edged sword in a town where cops didn't take kindly to being challenged. The officer's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the air crackled with unspoken threats. Then, headlights flashed in the distance, another car slowing as it passed. The officers exchanged a glance, and the lead one stepped back. "Watch yourself, Parker," he muttered, tossing Eli's papers onto the truck's hood. "We'll be seeing you." They retreated to their car, and as the patrol lights faded, Eli let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Mia grabbed his arm. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softening. Eli nodded, but his chest was tight. This wasn't just about a traffic stop. It was about Cloverdale, about the weight of a town that refused to let him be himself. And it was about the secret he'd been carrying for months, the one that could change everything. As they climbed back into the truck, Eli's phone buzzed. A text from Jamie, the new guy at the diner, the one whose shy smile had been haunting Eli's dreams. Meet me at the lake tonight. It read. Eli's heart skipped. Jamie was different kind. Quiet, but with a spark that made Eli feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. But in Cloverdale, love like theirs was a risk, a spark that could ignite a firestorm. What did it mean to love in a place that hated you for it? Eli didn't know, but as he started the truck and pulled back onto the road, he felt the answer coming closer, mile by mile. The lake was a mirror under the stars, its surface unbroken except for the occasional ripple from a jumping fish. Eli parked the truck near the water's edge, the engine's hum fading into the chorus of crickets. He glanced at Mia, who gave him a knowing nod. Go, she said. I'll wait here. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Eli managed a half smile, but his nerves were electric. He stepped out, the cool night air brushing his skin, and walked toward the dock where Jamie waited. The other man stood silhouetted against the water, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. Jamie was new to Cloverdale, a transplant from Richmond who'd taken a job at the diner to escape a past he rarely spoke of. But his eyes soft, searching, and a little sad had caught Eli's attention from day one. Hey, Eli called softly, stepping onto the creaking dock. Jamie turned, and his face lit up with that shy smile that made Eli's stomach flip. Hey, Jamie replied, his voice low, almost drowned by the night's sounds. Thought you might not come after, earlier. Eli frowned. You heard about the cops already. News traveled fast in Cloverdale, but this was ridiculous. Jamie shook his head. Not specifics. Just saw the lights from town. Figured it was you. You've got a knack for drawing attention. Not on purpose, Eli said, sitting on the dock's edge, his boots dangling above the water. Jamie joined him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The contact sent a jolt through Eli, and he wondered if Jamie felt it too. What did it mean to feel this pull toward someone in a place where every glance could be a betrayal? So, what happened? Jamie asked, his tone gentle but curious. Eli recounted the stop, the officer's taunts, Mia's defiance. He left out the part about his heart racing, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything he hadn't said about himself. About Jamie. They don't get it, Eli finished, staring at the water. They see the truck. They see me, and they think they know who I am. Jamie was quiet for a moment, then said, Maybe they're scared of you. Eli laughed, sharp and bitter. Scared? Of me? But Jamie's eyes were serious. Yeah. You're not what they expect. You don't fit their boxes. That scares people like them. The words hit Eli like a punch. He'd spent years fighting to be seen, to be understood, but Jamie saw him without trying. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. What about you? Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you see? Jamie hesitated, then turned to face him fully. I see someone who's stronger than he knows. Someone who's worth knowing. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken possibilities. Eli wanted to lean closer, to close the distance, but fear held him back. What would it cost to cross that line in a town like this? Before he could decide, headlights swept across the lake, and Eli tensed. Another patrol car. But it was just a pickup. Probably kids looking for a party spot. Still, the moment was broken, and Jamie stood, brushing off his jeans. We should head back, he said, but his hand lingered on Eli's shoulder, a promise of something more. Back at the truck, Mia was scrolling through her phone. Took you long enough, she teased, but her eyes softened when she saw Eli's expression. You good? She asked. Eli nodded, but his mind was spinning. Jamie's words, his touch, the weight of Cloverdale's judgment, it was all too much and not enough. As they drove back to town, Eli's thoughts drifted to his past. Growing up, he'd hidden who he was, pretending to be the son his father wanted, tough, straight, invisible. But when he came out at 17, his father's silence had been louder than any shout. His mother tried to bridge the gap, but Cloverdale's small-mindedness was a wall she couldn't climb. Eli had stayed, not because he loved the town, but because running felt like letting them win. Now, with Jamie, running didn't seem like an option anymore. But staying meant fighting, and Eli wasn't sure he was ready for that war. What did it mean to choose love when the world around you called it a sin? The diner was a fluorescent oasis in Cloverdale's sleepy downtown, its neon sign buzzing faintly as Eli wiped down tables. It was late, the kind of hour where only truckers and insomniacs lingered, nursing coffee and regrets. Eli's shift was almost over, but his mind was still at the lake, replaying Jamie's words, his touch. What did it mean to be seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't flinch at your truth? Eli didn't know, but he wanted to find out. He glanced at Jamie, who was refilling ketchup bottles at the counter, his movements careful and deliberate. Eli wondered what Jamie was running from. Richmond wasn't exactly a metropolis, but it had to be easier than Cloverdale. "Hey, pretty boy." A voice called from the door, shattering Eli's thoughts. It was Mitch, a regular with a chip on his shoulder and a beer gut to match. He swaggered in with his buddy, both already half drunk. "You serving tonight? Or just standing there looking cute?" Eli forced a smile, the kind he'd perfected for customers who thought their tips bought them the right to be cruel. "What can I get you, Mitch?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. But Mitch's grin widened. Predatory. "How about a date? Bet you'd look real nice cleaned up." The diner went quiet, the other customers glancing over, some amused, some uncomfortable. Jamie's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Eli felt the familiar heat of humiliation, but he pushed it down. "Just the usual, then," he said, turning toward the kitchen. Mitch grabbed his wrist, not hard, but enough to make Eli freeze. "Come on, don't be like that," Mitch slurred. "We all know what you are." The words hung in the air, ugly and heavy. Eli yanked his hand free, his heart racing. But before he could speak, Jamie was there, stepping between them. "Back off," Jamie said, his voice low but firm. Mitch blinked, surprised, then laughed. "What's this?" "Your boyfriend coming to the rescue." The word boyfriend was a taunt, but Jamie didn't flinch. "He said he's not interested," Jamie repeated, his gaze steady. Mitch's buddy stepped forward, but the cook, Big Al, emerged from the kitchen, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Problem here?" Al asked, his voice a rumble. Mitch hesitated, then backed off, muttering under his breath as he and his friend slid into a booth. Eli exhaled, his hands shaking slightly. Jamie touched his arm, a brief, grounding gesture. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching Eli's. Eli nodded, but the encounter had left a mark. It wasn't just Mitch, it was the way the whole town seemed to watch him, waiting for him to prove their prejudices right. Later, as they closed up, Jamie lingered by the counter. "You don't have to put up with that," he said quietly. Eli shrugged, wiping down the last table. "It's just how it is here. You get used to it." But Jamie shook his head. "You shouldn't have to." The words stirred something in Eli, a mix of anger and hope. He wanted to tell Jamie everything, how tired he was of hiding, how much he wanted to be more than Cloverdale's punching bag. But fear stopped him. What if Jamie wasn't ready for the weight of Eli's truth? As they stepped into the cool night, Jamie paused. "I'm not like them," he said, almost to himself. "I don't care what they think." Eli's breath caught. Was Jamie saying what he thought he was? Before he could ask, Jamie's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face clouding. "I gotta go," he said, and just like that, he was gone, leaving Eli with more questions than answers. What did it mean to trust someone in a town that thrived on secrets? Eli didn't know, but he was starting to think Jamie might be worth the risk. The next morning, Eli woke to a text from Mia. "Meet me at the garage. Got something to show you." He dragged himself out of bed, the weight of last night's diner shift still clinging to him. Cloverdale's auto shop was Mia's domain, where she fixed cars and defied every stereotype about women in greasy coveralls. Eli loved watching her work, her hands steady, her focus unbreakable. When he arrived, Mia was under a sedan, her voice muffled as she called out, "You're late." Eli grinned, leaning against the workbench. "What's so urgent?" he asked. Mia slid out, wiping her hands on a rag. "Got a surprise," she said, leading him to the back of the shop. There, under a tarp, was Eli's truck, or what used to be his truck. Mia had repainted it, the faded red now a sleek midnight blue, with subtle pride flag decals on the tailgate. Eli's jaw dropped. "Mia? What, how?" he stammered. She smirked. "Figured it was time your ride matched who you are. Plus, it'll piss off the right people." Eli ran his hand over the smooth paint, his throat tight. The truck was more than a vehicle. It was his freedom, his defiance. Now, it was a statement. "You're insane," he said, pulling Mia into a hug. She laughed, but her eyes were serious. "You're worth it, Eli. Don't let this town forget that." What did it mean to claim your space in a world that wanted to erase you? Eli felt the question burning as he drove the truck through town. Heads turning, whispers following. He didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt like he was winning. That evening, Jamie showed up at Eli's apartment, his face tense. "Can we talk?" he asked, and Eli's stomach twisted. He let Jamie in, the small space feeling smaller with the weight of whatever Jamie was carrying. They sat on the couch, the silence heavy. "I saw your truck," Jamie started. "It's bold." Eli braced himself, expecting judgment, but Jamie's eyes were soft. "It's you," he added, and Eli's heart stuttered. Jamie leaned closer, his voice low. "I left Richmond because I couldn't be myself there. I thought Cloverdale would be different, but it's worse. Except for you." Eli's breath caught. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jamie's hand found his, tentative but warm. "I'm saying I'm tired of hiding. I like you, Eli. More than I should. Maybe. In a place like this." The confession hung between them, fragile and electric. Eli wanted to say it back, to tell Jamie how his smile had become Eli's anchor, but fear clawed at him. What would it cost to love openly in Cloverdale? Before he could answer, a loud knock startled them. Through the window, Eli saw the flash of red and blue lights. The cops were back. Eli's heart slammed against his ribs as he opened the door. The same officer from the traffic stop stood there, his partner behind him, both looking grim. "Evening, Parker," the lead officer said, his tone clipped. "Got a report of vandalism. Your truck's got some interesting new decorations." Eli's blood ran cold. The pride decals. "Of course. It's my truck," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I can paint it however I want." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Not if it's causing a disturbance. Step outside." Jamie stood, his jaw tight. "He's not going anywhere," he said, stepping beside Eli. The officer's gaze flicked to Jamie, then back to Eli, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Got yourself a bodyguard now, huh? Let's make this quick." Mia's voice cut through the tension as she appeared from the hallway, phone in hand. "I'm recording," she said, holding it up. "You want to explain why you're harassing him over a paint job?" The officer froze, his smirk fading. Cloverdale's cops weren't used to being challenged, especially not on camera. The standoff lasted seconds, but felt like hours. Finally, the officer stepped back. "We'll be watching you, Parker," he said, then turned and left, his partner following. Eli's knees buckled, and Jamie caught his arm, steadying him. "They're not going to stop," Eli said, his voice shaking. Jamie's grip tightened. "Then we don't stop either." Mia pocketed her phone, her eyes blazing. "They're scared. Eli. That truck. You. Use it's a threat to their little world. Keep pushing." What did it mean to keep pushing when every step felt like a battle? Eli didn't know, but with Jamie and Mia by his side, he felt a flicker of courage. That night, as Jamie stayed over, they talked until dawn about their fears, their dreams, the lives they wanted beyond Cloverdale's borders. Jamie's hand never left Eli's, and for the first time, Eli let himself believe in a future where love didn't have to hide. But Cloverdale wasn't done with them. The next day, Eli found his truck's tires slashed, the Pride decals scratched beyond recognition. The message was clear: conform or pay. Eli's anger burned hotter than his fear. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, was fighting for Jamie, for Mia, for every kid in this town who felt like they didn't belong. The garage smelled of oil and determination as Mia helped Eli replace the truck's tires. She didn't ask if he was okay, she knew he wasn't. The vandalism wasn't just an attack on his property. It was an attack on his existence. "We're fixing this," she said, tightening a lug nut. "And then we're fighting back." Eli nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Jamie had been quiet since the vandalism, his usual warmth replaced by a guarded tension. Eli couldn't shake the fear that Jamie might pull away, that Cloverdale's cruelty would break what they'd started to build. What did it mean to hold on to love when the world kept trying to tear it apart? That evening, Eli found Jamie at the diner, scrubbing the counter with more force than necessary. "Talk to me," Eli said, sitting across from him. Jamie sighed, setting the rag down. "I thought I could handle this place," he said. "But it's relentless. I don't want to drag you down with me." Eli's heart sank. "You're not dragging me anywhere," he said. "I'm here because I want to be with you." Jamie's eyes met his, and for a moment, the diner's fluorescent hum faded. "I'm scared," Jamie admitted. "Not of you, of what this town could do to us." Eli reached across the counter, taking Jamie's hand. "Then we face it together." It was a promise, one Eli wasn't sure he could keep, but he meant every word. Jamie squeezed his hand, and the spark between them flared brighter than Cloverdale's hate. The next day, Eli and Mia organized a small gathering at the Lockyer, quiet act of defiance. They invited a few allies, Big Al, a couple of co-workers, and some kids from the local queer youth group. They repainted the truck, this time with bolder Pride colors, and shared stories under the stars. It wasn't a protest, not yet, but it was a start. Cloverdale would see them, whether it wanted to or not. What did it mean to build a community in a place that rejected you? Eli was starting to understand it meant finding your people and holding on tight. The news spread like wildfire. Eli's truck, now a rolling Pride flag, was impossible to ignore. Some in Cloverdale cheered quietly, leaving notes of support under his wipers. Others, like Mitch and his crew, doubled down, their glares sharper, their whispers louder. The cops circled closer, pulling Eli over twice in a week for routine checks. Each time, Mia recorded, and each time, the officers left empty-handed. Eli felt the pressure building, But Jamie's presence kept him grounded. They stole moments together, late-night drives, quiet talks at the lake, a kiss under the stars that felt like a rebellion. But the town's anger was growing, and Eli knew it was only a matter of time before it exploded. One night, at the diner, Mitch crossed a line. He cornered Eli in the parking lot, his breath sour with whiskey. "You think you're untouchable now?" he spat. "Keep flaunting that shit, and you'll regret it." Before Eli could respond, Jamie was there, shoving Mitch back. "Leave him alone," Jamie said, his voice shaking but resolute. Mitch swung, and chaos erupted. Eli pulled Jamie back as Big Al and Mia rushed out, breaking up the fight. Mitch stumbled off, cursing, but the damage was done. The next morning, the diner's windows were smashed, and a note was taped to the door: "Freaks don't belong here." Eli's hands shook as he read it, but Jamie's voice was steady. "We're not running," he said. Mia nodded, already on the phone with the youth group, planning a response. What did it mean to stand your ground when the ground itself seemed to hate you? Eli was about to find out. The town square was quiet, save for the hum of anticipation. Eli stood on the makeshift stage, his truck parked proudly behind him, its colors gleaming under the morning sun. Beside him were Jamie, Mia, Big Al, and a small but fierce group of allies. They'd organized a rally, not a protest, but a celebration of who they were, who they loved, and who they refused to stop being. Eli's voice trembled as he spoke into the microphone. "This town tried to break me," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd, some hostile, some curious, some tearful with pride. "But I'm still here. We're still here. And we're not going anywhere." Jamie took his hand, and the crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in boos. The cops watched from the sidelines, their faces unreadable. Eli didn't care. He'd spent years hiding, shrinking, surviving. Now, he was living. The rally wasn't perfect. There were shouts, threats, and a few thrown bottles. But there were also hugs, laughter, and kids from the youth group holding signs that read "Love Wins." Mia filmed it all, her grin fierce. Big Al handed out coffee, his presence a quiet shield. And Jamie never let go of Eli's hand. That night, as they sat by the lake, Eli looked at Jamie and saw a future. Not an easy one, but a real one. "We did it," Eli said, his voice soft. Jamie smiled, his eyes bright. "Yeah, and we'll keep doing it." What did it mean to love in a world that fought you at every turn? It meant showing up, every day, with your heart open and your head high. It meant driving a truck that screamed who you were, even when the world screamed back. For Eli, Jamie, and their found family, it meant everything.